Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We are continuing our reading of Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra book. Witty, insightful, filled with allegories that really get the mind thinking, and I enjoy it because you sort of allow your mind to go on this creative pathway. And this is the section titled The Soothsayer. So, let's see what he has to say. Let's begin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And I saw a great sadness descend upon mankind. The best grew weary of their works. A doctrine appeared accompanied by faith. All is empty. All is the same. All has been. So that is pretty tense. So, all is empty, all is the same, all has been. And from all the hills it echoed, all is empty, all is the same, all has been. So all has been sounds a lot like there's nothing new under the sun. And all is the same sounds a bit like we're all one, man. And then all is empty sounds a bit nihilistic. So you have these sort of nihilistic phrases built in with something almost cult-like. Indeed, we have harvested, but why did all our fruit turn rotten and brown? What fell down from the evil moon last night? In vain was all our work. Our wine has turned to poison. An evil eye has seared our fields and hearts. We have all become dry, and if fire should descend on us, we should turn to ashes. So this one I thought was interesting because we have all become dry, and if fire should descend on us, we should turn to ashes. So dry has this multiple facet to it symbolically. So when you're listening to something very dry, it can also mean monotonous, monotoned. There's not this enthusiasm, and the flow of thought has dried up. So when people talk about a flow state, if you look at someone in their flow state, there's this creativity coming. And if a river dries up, well, it's stopped flowing. And if you listen to like river sounds, the sound of that movement soothes you. When it's dry, the area all around it isn't as aesthetically pleasing, and little can grow from it. So when your mind is in a flow state, it shows that there's some like symbolic water movement going on. I know that sounds kind of weird, but ideas can flourish, ideas can grow. And when you're dry, it means like you're not producing new ideas. You're not a garden of thought anymore. You have let that go. And fire should descend on us sounds a lot like wrath and rage, criticism. When you think about how I got this really good black Assam tea with a little bit of milk. It's so good. Iced. When you think about when someone challenges your ideas and they come with fire and fury, and it's really like just this dragon breathing and torching your crops, all your trees of knowledge, just rah! And if you're not fortified against that, got some thick bark on you, you'll go up in flames. Some people might not know, but there are trees who their bark can withstand a certain amount of fire. Redwood trees got this really cool thick bark. And some trees are different, so they catch fire easily, and if it's dry, it's gonna light up. So moisturize that brain, wetten that mind with the water state of wisdom. There's so much here poetically that he's getting at that you can read into his statements, and it's really cool to try to decipher them. Indeed, we have wearied the fire itself. Okay, so notice this. We have wearied the fire itself. So so you're so hydrated with thought that fire itself is having a hard time consuming you. You could say you're so frozen over with who you are. Which ice is, it's not dry, is it? Besides dry ice, but you get the point. That you're so cold, fire can't consume you. It's hard for the fire to bring you down. You're resilient to the burn, to the char. All our wells have dried up, even the sea has withdrawn. So, we often have these phrases of like, the well of your mind. So, what is the action one does with the water well? You put a bucket in, you take knowledge out. So, people will use this analogy of you can look at the glass as half full or half empty. You can't put more water in an already full cup. So if your mind is like the full glass of water, nothing else can be poured in. And when you think of knowledge as a well that you pull from, and if all the scholars have died out, there's no more knowledge to be pulled out of that well. So there's a lot of wordplay going on here. Even the sea has withdrawn. All the soil would crack, but the depths refuse to devour. Alas, where is there still a sea in which one might drown? Aha! Alas, where is there a sea in which one might drown? Which is a very cool statement. So, might drown, that can happen when you go down the rabbit hole of something. You really pursue it, and then you go and look down there and you're like, wow. I mean, when I think about how much Islamic knowledge is out there, it's a vast sea. And I'll get anxious that I can't discover it all. I can't read it all. But you're like a captain of your ship sailing those seas, seeing where those waters take you to what shores. It's fascinating until you die. So, knowledge is a vast sea, and you can get consumed in it, you can get overwhelmed with facts, but it's still a journey. But as he mentioned, the sea has withdrawn, so the knowledge is drying up. It's kind of like YouTube. It's like all nonsense influencers the algorithm promotes, where there's people who are thought-provoking, but not every culture values thought-provoking things. Verily, we have become too weary even to die. We are still waking and living on in tombs. Thus heard a soothsayer speak, and a prophecy. So a soothsayer was saying that, huh? What you doing? We don't need no soothsayer. A prophecy touched his heart and changed him. He walked about sad and weary, and he became like those of whom the soothsayer had spoken. Verily, he said to his disciples, little is lacking, and this long twilight will come. Alas, how shall I save my light through it? It must not suffocate in this sadness. So that's a very unique statement. How shall I save my light through it? It must not suffocate in this sadness. This is something that speaks to about like depression in a real serious sense. So there's a song that we used to sing in Sunday school. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. And the kids would hold a candle, and you have your hand there, and you move it about, and it was hinting at, don't let Shaitan take out that light from you. Don't let it be blown out. And if you think about it in another sense, your nur, your light that you get in Islam, when you're pious or Allah blesses you with that really cool nur, it's like a miracle. And I remember that happened to me once where my face had that light, and people can make fun of it, but it's real. I was reading the Quran, and I was super humble, open-hearted, and I was reading it. And then I went in the bathroom, and my face had a yellowish glow to it, and it was real. And I don't care if anyone doesn't believe it. But when you are depressed and sad, the gray under your eyes, this grayness consumes you. When you smoke weed, you get that pale grayness to you. If you stay up all night and you're partying, snorting coke, people else have a grayness to them. And a lot of women mask their grayness with bronzers and blushes. And they do a glow up, but it's all makeup. It's an illusion. You can't really see their light shine. And when your inner life force is spoken about in this light sense, it does get suffocated with sadness. It's like that little candle that's trying to stay, like the flame is trying to grow, but the wax keeps pulling in, and it's hanging on for dear life until some of that wax is drained. It's fascinating. So many analogies here. For it shall be a light for distant worlds and even more distant nights. So think about that. A light that shines so bright, it's a pillar. It's a torch. Sounds very Promethean in a way. That torch that you'll see. I think they have one on the dime still. On the US dime. Just look for this torture. Where's my mind? Torch symbology. Alright? Because in the dark nights in the past, you needed those torches to go. You needed it. And knowledge really is like that, because when you are gripped in sadness and you feel like there's no way out, and then suddenly you speak and you ask someone for advice, and as they talk, an idea comes and you're like, oh, I never thought of that. And a light goes, feels like a light goes off in your head, and now you see a way out of your darkness. It's fascinating. So to have your inner self shine so bright that you lead others out of the darkness and you are a beacon of light for others. That's really how I see the hijab on a really spiritual level. Thus grieved in his heart, Zarathustra walked about, and for 3 days he took neither food nor drink. He had no rest and lost his speech. At last he fell into a deep sleep, but his disciples sat around him in long night watches and waited with great concern for him to wake and speak again and recover from his melancholy. And this is the speech of Zarathustra when he awoke, but his voice came to his disciples as if from a great distance. Listen to the dream which I dreamed, my friends, and help me guess its meaning. This dream is still a riddle to me. Its meaning is concealed in it and imprisoned, and does not yet soar above it with unfettered wings. I had turned my back on all life, thus I dreamed. I had become a night watchman and a guardian of tombs upon the lonely mountain castle of death. Up there I guarded his coffins, the musty vaults were full of such marks of triumph. Life that had been overcome looked at me out of glass coffins. Glass coffins, that'd be creepy. However, when I went to the museum, you see those mummies in their open, their sarcophagus coffin thing, and they're in a glass coffin because there's a glass around them, and it's really interesting. Look at its old dead body. I breathe the odor of dusty eternities. That sounds cool. I breathe the odor of dusty eternities. See what I mean? I really enjoy his writing style because it hits to this deeper sorrow yet somberness. It's poetic. It's very potent. Very potent. Because you can imagine yourself going into a very old place and it feels very still. Sultry and dusty lay my soul, and who could have aired his soul there? The brightness of midnight was always about me. Loneliness crouched next to it, and as a third death rat, the silence. The worst of my friends, I had keys, the rustiest of all keys. I knew how to use them to open the most creaking of all gates. Like a wickedly angry croaking, the sound ran through the long corridors. When the gate's wings moved, fiendishly cried this bird, ferociously at being awakened. Yet still more terrible and heart-constricting was the moment when silence returned and it grew quiet about me. And I sat alone in this treacherous silence. Thus time passed and crawled, if time still existed. How should I know? But eventually that happened which awakened me. Thrice strokes struck at the gate like thunder. The vault echoed and howled thrice. Then I went to the gate. "Alpa," I cried, "who is carrying his ashes up to the mountain? Alpa, Alpa, who is carrying the ashes up the mountain?" And I pressed the key and tried to lift the gate and exerted myself. But still it did not give an inch. Then a roaring wind tore its wings apart. Whistling, shrilling, and piercing, it cast up a black coffin before me. You can almost picture the scene here. And amid the roaring and whistling and shrilling, the coffin burst and spewed out 1,000-fold laughter. And from 1,000 grimaces of children, angels, owls, fools, and butterflies as big as children, it laughed and mocked and roared at me. Then I was terribly frightened. It threw me to the ground, and I cried in horror, as I have never cried, and my own cry awakened me, and I came to my senses. Butterflies as big as children? That sounds like a nightmare. I love seeing the butterflies. I wanted to have a butterfly hobby where I would hatch them, raise the caterpillars, let them be in their cocoons, and hatch them and set them free. But they're as big as, if they were big as children, I'd be like, get away from me. That sounds terrifying. There's some beautiful large moths that are like very stunning, and they don't live very long. And they're so cute, but I don't want to touch them. Thus Zarathustra told his dream, and then became silent. For as yet he did not know the interpretation of his dream, but the disciple whom he loved most rose quickly, took Zarathustra's hand, and said, "Your life itself interprets this dream for us, O Zarathustra. Are you not yourself the wind with the shrill whistling that tears open the gates of the castles of death? Are you not yourself the coffin full of colors, sarcasms, and angelic grimaces of life?" Hey, that's a cool phrase. A coffin full of colorful sarcasms and angelic grimaces of life. Verily, like 1,000-fold children's laughter, Zarathustra enters all death chambers, and laughing at all the night watchmen and guardians of tombs, and at whoever else is rattling with gloomy keys. You will frighten and prostrate them with your laughter, and your power over them will make them faint and wake them. And even when the long twilight and the weariness of death come, you will not set in our sky. You advocate of life, new stars you have let us see, and new wonders of the night. Verily, laughter itself you have spread over us like a colorful tent. Henceforth, children's laughter will well forth from all coffins. Henceforth, a strong wind will come triumphantly to all weariness of death. Of this you yourself are surety and soothsayer. Verily, this is what you dreamed of, your enemies. That was your hardest dream. But as you woke from them and came to your senses, thus they shall awaken from themselves and come to you. Spooky. Spooky. Thus spoke the disciple, and all others crowded around Zarathustra, and took hold of his hands and wanted to persuade him to leave his bed and his sadness and return to them. But Zarathustra sat erect on his resting place, with a strange look in his eyes, like one coming home from a long sojourn in strange lands, he looked at his disciples and examined their faces, and as yet he did not recognize them. But when they lifted him up and put him on his feet, behold, his eyes suddenly changed. He comprehended all that had happened, stroked his beard, and said in a strong voice, "Now then, there is a time for this too. But see to it, my disciples, that we shall have a good meal, and soon. Thus I plan to atone for bad dreams. The soothsayer, however, shall eat and drink by my side, and verily I shall show him a sea in which he can drown." Ooh. Now, for us Muslims, I remember reading, if you see a soothsayer, you have left the fold of Islam, if I recall. You're not I read that in Akida Tawheed by Dr. Salih Ozan. Can't remember the page number, but I do recall that they had a whole thing on soothsayers. Thus spoke Zarathustra, but when he looked a long time into the face of the disciple who had played the dream interpreter, and he shook his head. Wonder why he shook his head. Gloomy keys, these guardians of tombs. Speaking of dryness, and then remember he just said here, show him a sea in which he can drown. So the sea of knowledge. So it's not going to be a dry, barren landscape in his knowledge world, but rather one that is ever rich with fish. Lots of poetic stuff here. I truly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. Let me know which line was your favorite. Man, it's a great book. We're over 100 pages deep in it. If you'd like to support my work and see more about what I write, you can do so by going to my blog, which is www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there.